Hey guys, remember to like the video and hit subscribe. Yeah, a maybe is better than an absolutely no.
Maybe.
Do you think that represents the core or average Trump voter, or were these the group of people that put him over the edge?
There are many things going on here, and once again, I don't have a magnifying glass, but I have what you can see from the outside. I'm not in any way underscoring the fact that there are white nationalists out there, the fact that there are the Proud Boys out there, the fact that there are Christian, white supremacist Christian nationalists. This is really scary stuff. So he has done enough, bird whistles. He knows how to attract anybody. He'll look at anybody. He'll say, "Oh, I need the kids." Okay, I like TikTok. I like TikTok. Any group, he knows how to get you. There's a woman, Barbara. Is it Corcoran? Is that how you pronounce it? She's a big real estate mogul here.
Okay.
So I heard her on a video, and she said, "I know Donald Trump." She said, "I've known him for many years. Our real estate companies began roughly at the same time." She said, "I've spent hours in meetings with Donald Trump." She said, "I know what he does." She said, "He has an eerie ability. He will go into a room, and he has an eerie ability to know where you're vulnerable in order to make that sale." So the woman who was interviewing her said, "Oh, so you're saying he's a master salesman?" She said, "No, I'm not saying he's a master salesman. I'm saying he's an eerie phenomenon. And what he had done in those meetings is what he has done to this country. He's completely amoral. So if it's the Proud Boys, I could get them by talking a certain way. There was a Rolling Stone interview, I think, with Jared Kushner that I read shortly after Trump's win in 2016, where Kushner said, he was sitting in a McDonald's with his father-in-law. And he looked around and he said to Donald Trump, "There are a lot of angry people out there. We could harness all that and make you president." Now, the way I look at it is there are all those loving, decent, good, intelligent people out there. We could harness all that and change the world. One of the things that running for president twice has convinced me, the problem is not with the American people. We're good and decent people. I'm not saying we're better than anyone else, but we're not worse either. The problem is not the consciousness of the American people. The problem is a political system that acts like a lid, acts like a suppressant, when if we just allowed for the genuine, organic unfolding of what should be democracy and the real voices of people, this country would be fine. And that is what the Democratic Party must become again, a real conduit for that.
One of the things I noticed about the Republican side of things is they seem to be wholly coordinated, or at least consistent in all of their messaging from the top down. Like if I see a guy online saying something, I know that Trump probably just said it, or Vivek said it, or I know it's all the same. One of the things that you speak about in being the DNC chair is kind of empowering the individual state parties to kind of like take the reins on things. How much, I guess, like coordination do you see the DNC chair is having, or the Democratic Party having with the other states, versus just kind of like setting them loose and saying good luck? How do you see that role, like those competing forces?
Having run for president, particularly this time, I lived at the effect of the behavioral patterns of the DNC. So I had a natural curiosity about a lot of that. Since running, the political malpractice is so deep. Nobody's even tried. What you're saying is that there's a cohesion, that every school board election, every local election, every city council, every media, every state election, they're there with their messaging. We haven't even tried. We're talking about a few consultancy groups who come up with pamphlets to be handed out 3 weeks before an election. We don't have a cohesion. We don't have a cohesive story. So when you say how much should that be the work of the DNC chair, given how little there is, huge. That's why you have to have someone basically in charge of the ground game, because ground game is important. And like I already mentioned, we have someone who totally knows how to do that, I believe, very well. Plus, he's an ethical and honorable man, I know from having run. But what you're talking about now is going to need, it necessitates, I believe, someone who knows about communication and knows how to bring together. I was reading an article. It was an interview with some major CEO, some big Fortune 500 company. He said 20 years ago, we were looking for people who understood the digital space. Today, we're looking for storytellers. And that's what needs to happen, because it's exactly what you say. They have a story. Now, our story, if you could look throughout history, one of the grandest stories is the United States of America. We had 56 signers of the Declaration of Independence. That document posited principles of possibility, human possibility, as deeply spiritual as political, that all men are created equal, that all have the inalienable rights of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, and that governments are instituted to secure those rights. And if it's not happening, the people have the right to alter it or abolish it. With that, possibility was open that had never existed on the planet. 56 signers, but 41 of them were slave owners. That dichotomy has been with us from the inception. It's baked into the cake. We are both and have been, that struggle has been reiterated in every generation. We have been the best that humanity has to offer, and we at times have been the worst humanity has to offer. Now, if you realize that every generation has reiterated the struggle, some more dramatically than others, then you look at the overall arc of history and you go, but we've done well. We had slavery, but then we had the abolitionists. We had the institutionalized suppression of women, but then we had the women's suffragist movement, the passage of the 19th Amendment. We had the Gilded Age, and then we had the establishment of organized labor. We had segregation, and then we had the civil rights movement. It's our turn now. It's no different. There have always been in this country people whose hearts really got, this is important. This is important. This is bigger than my life, this is serving the ages stuff. This is big. And there have been people in every generation, including ours, who for their own ideological and or financial purposes find democracy kind of inconvenient to their purposes and have proven time and time again they will do whatever it takes to make sure that those principles are not actualized. You know, even Thomas Jefferson said, it is the general tendency of the rich to prey upon the poor. So now today it's not a specific institution like slavery. It's an economic paradigm. It's the very idea that short-term profits for this matrix of corporate powers, insurance companies, pharmaceutical companies, big food, big ag, big chemical companies, gun manufacturers, banks, financial institutions, tech in some cases, big oil and defense contractors, their profits supersede democracy at this point. And that's going to only get worse with Trump and Musk. And it's our turn to push back. Let's not be the first generation in American history to ultimately wimp out on doing what it takes to put this country back on track. What bigger story can you get than the story I just said? And that, to me, it's like when Franklin Roosevelt talked about the economic royalists. That would be the corporatists of today. They came after him. They called him socialist and so forth. What he said was, I welcome their hatred. That's who we have to become again. And then we'll win because people will know that we mean it. And until we do mean it.
When we consider kind of the more boring, I guess, logistics questions, one of the things I look at is on the Republican side. So you do have this cabinet of, I don't know if we're at 7 or 8 like billionaire people now. You've got Americans simultaneously frustrated with media control, and then you have Elon Musk, or frustrated with pharmaceuticals, and then you've got Vivek Ramaswamy, disappointed in housing or education. You've got Donald Trump. Do you think that, or not do you think it's a mistake, how does the Democratic Party fund itself if they were to take the steps to start aggressively cutting off every single source of corporate money, even if that money might come with no strings attached or there's an alignment in vision? Like, do you think that might be taking like an even further step back where you're putting yourself in an unwinnable position? Or how do you replace that money? Or is that not important? Or what do you think?
The gold in today's currency is human relationships. Hillary Clinton had a whole lot more money than Donald Trump did. Look at all the money that Kamala Harris had. And look at the absurd expenditure. And Bernie Sanders already proved how much money you can make in small donations when people care. We are trading with, it's whoredom. You want that money so badly that you're willing to sacrifice your values, you're willing to sacrifice your own ethics. You do that, and your own democracy, by, once again, suppressing primaries, kicking people off ballots. What did that money do for you? It just made people, with every dollar you spend, it made people, the smell. So I believe that when we do the right thing, the money will come. The money will be there. Money will be there. and small donations.
What do you think sets you apart from everybody else running for chair that you would want the other DNC voters to keep in mind when they go to cast their ballot?
Well, there's some good people.
There are.
You know, and there are some good people running. I believe, however, that I represent a fundamental change, not incremental change. As I said before, the problem is that not that we don't have political car mechanics. The problem is we're on the wrong road. That's another line from Roosevelt that I love. He was talking about the presidency. He said, the main job of the presidency, he said, is not administrative but moral leadership. We need to return to the prophetic voice of justice. Justice, justice, thou shalt pursue. That was the prophetic voice of the Democratic Party. When you don't stand in the light, the darkness is going to overwhelm you. And so I think there's a lot of talent, and some of which, were I to be chair, I would definitely tap into, as there's tremendous talent throughout the membership. But I believe that we need to lead at this point. First of all, that's very common in business, that when you really need to transform, I mean, you can ask any consultant in transforming businesses. The consultant comes in and says, is this fixable or is this not fixable? Any consultant would come in and say, you know, this isn't fixable. This is on such a level of failure. The only option now is transformation. That is your fix. It's beyond fix, it's transforming. And, you know, I'm not the greatest visionary in the United States, but I think I'm the only one running for the NC chair. If you want excitement, if you want adrenaline, if you want authenticity, if you want audacity, if you want somebody who can really talk to people where they live, and that person knows that I understand because I've been on those streets up close and personal with people for years, that would be me. When my career began, I was very involved with the AIDS crisis. And then because of that, I was very up close and personal with people in some of their darkest. The joke used to be, nobody calls Marianne because things are going well. I was always the person you called after sometimes the worst news. But in the 1980s and most of the 1990s, my experience of people whose lives were really in trouble, for the most part, was people for whom the crisis was the exception. It wasn't the rule. What I began to realize in the late 90s, around the year 2000, more and more people who I would meet for whom the crisis was the rule and not the exception. It wasn't just that they had cancer, it's that they didn't have health care. It wasn't just that they couldn't find a job, it's they couldn't live on just one. And that's when I began to realize no amount of private charity can compensate for this, as important as that space is and where I've been very active. I think after as many years as I've had being with people in their most agonizing hour, I think it reads when I'm in situations where I would like them to know the Democratic Party is fine. And they're not going to believe it. The messaging as it is now. One young man said to me last night, he said, I went door to door during this last session. He's in Illinois. And he said, and I was, presenting this sheet of what Kamala's policies were. And he said, I would show the sheet to someone, and it wasn't that they said, I don't like any of those things. They said, I don't think she did.
Loosely related, I did a YouTube show where it was called Street Epistemology. You'd be oppositional to a Trump voter, and we had whiteboards, and we had to write down why we think the other guy wouldn't vote for. I think this was 2021, so it was over Biden versus Trump, and he had 3 guesses for mine, and I had 3 guesses for his. And I'm a pretty smart guy, and I talked to a lot of people. I was like, I got this, no problem. And I think I wish I could remember exactly what I'd written, but for why he wouldn't vote for Biden, I was like, probably wouldn't do enough on the border, probably wouldn't do enough on, I'm a Democrat, so it was 3 policy positions. And then he guessed mine, and I don't even remember what he said, but he was right on like the second one he had it. It's like, okay, yeah. And when I read down mine, I was wrong on all of his. I was like, what's the thing that's keeping you here? And he said, I think Biden is senile.
I'm sorry?
He said, I think Biden is senile. And I was like, oh. And sometimes, yeah, there are moments where it's like, okay, my brain is very off here, I guess, in how we're viewing. Not to say whether he was right or wrong, or not to say anything else, but just sometimes the perspective that we view the elections from, or the important issues. Like you said, like sometimes people assume people are voting for Trump because of these policy reasons. And it's like people oftentimes aren't powered by that.
Like I said, the part of the brain that rationally analyzes an issue isn't the same part of the brain that decides who to vote for, which is why primaries are important. Because if you have debates, everybody gets to see all the candidates and get a feel for them and get to know them.
If you did win the chair position, or for whoever does win the chair position, do you do you think that there's going to be a lot of pushback from other parts of the Democrat apparatus in moving the party? Like, do you see the media fighting it, the state parties fighting it? How do you view that going
If
forward?
I may say so, that's why it should be me, because it's going to take one tough broad to know what they're doing and be able to push back. Most of the people that I've heard talk, I feel they underestimate, because I've run twice. I know them. I know how they act. I know the deep level of, they just wait. They don't even care who wins as long as it's not me, because they know, we'll get him. We'll go around him. We'll be fine. He's either one of us, as in one case, or we can get around that. We can put him in a corral and make sure he doesn't.
Final question from my perspective. I have an audience of who are considered, I guess, like the dispossessed of the Democratic Party, so younger white men, basically. What do you think?
We're women, and we're dispossessed too. We're
sure. Okay.
We're homeless too.
Sure. Yeah. Do you think that there's anything in particular that the Democratic Party can do to kind of like win some of these people back? Like in particular,
Okay.
do you think it's just the broad message narrative?
Okay.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So first of all, and you'll understand this based on everything I've said, I don't think things like, what could I do to win them back? That's the kind of language that doesn't even reside in my heart. My heart is, where have we failed them, okay? Because if you stop failing people, they'll be yours again, right? Where have we failed men? I think we're all male, we're all female within our, psyche, etc. But I believe that economic opportunity is so important for a human being to feel agency and to feel the capacity to produce. And I believe that when you fail to provide economic opportunity for people that can make them feel dignified and that they can support their loved ones, I think it does damage to people. You have some trade deal, and then you're going to have boarded up factories, and people can't find jobs there anymore. Men who have told me, my wife won't respect me, my kids won't respect me. I've seen damage done to people's psyche. It's more than financial. And so I believe for women, but for men, for anyone, however we identify sexually today, I think that that's a primary cause of, I will go anywhere, I will do anything, and I will listen to even somebody I know is a total whatever he is, if it can make me feel I can stand up straight again and live a life of purpose.
Thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.